Caroline, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I'm really delighted to be here.
Wonderful. Caroline, before we dive into gender equity, I would love to explore more your background. You were born in Beirut and grew up during civil war. How did that early experience shape the woman and the leader that you are today?
Well, honestly, I think it actually shaped everything about who I am today. It's a very unique experience that I don't wish upon anyone, but I think that there are some positive characteristics that we can take away from being in a situation where you have to bring everything about your courage, about your strength, your resilience, and make the best of it. And the war started when I was only 7 years old, and it ended when I was 22. So these are very formative years that literally shape who you become. So obviously there are things that made it harder for me to feel that I fit in to a normal, safe Western society when I moved here. But then I decided, do I really need to fit in? Can I just use my difference to make a difference and be accepted the way that I am? And I think this is also why I do so much work around inclusion and the importance of diverse perspectives and diverse backgrounds. So in short, definitely what I've been through during my childhood, during my youth, have not only shaped who I am, but the way that I show up for others, the way that I lead my team, the way that what I probably, and I put the bar pretty high, but what I expect of people that surround me, to be brave, to stand up for what you believe in, and to protect others, especially the vulnerable.
I love that. Tell us what being brave means to you today.
Well, being brave, especially today, at a time where social media is such a big part of our lives, where people hide behind their keyboards and their screens to say unimaginable things to people that they don't agree with. I think being brave is standing up for what you believe in, even in the face of adversity. I think it's funny, just an anecdote, but yesterday I was sharing it was a snow day, and there was a video that said, snow day, schools are closed. In the meantime, 1986 looked like this, and you would see this school bus going through the snow, and the kids were like flying. Nobody's paying attention or worried about their kids. So I think being brave, being bold, is being courageous. Everybody is afraid. Everybody is scared. It's normal, but it's what you do. Do you stop? Do you freeze? Or do you still act? And as much as I think that fear is contagious, I also strongly believe that courage is contagious as well. And so it takes one person. And I've often been that one person who says, stop, let's do this, or let's do that, or let's help this, and I see a movement. Often people are just waiting. They don't want to be the first one, but they're waiting for that brave person or that courageous person to stand up, because there is a risk. Everything that we say, everything that we do that is not in the norm is a risk, because you don't know how people are going to react, and you don't necessarily measure the consequences, but you do it anyway because you think this is the right thing to do, and you can't see yourself living your life any other way.
Very powerful. So let's dive into the work that you do. And I was curious to learn from you as to why do you believe progress towards gender parity has been so slow, even when the data has been so clear for decades?
It's incredible. It's really unfathomable that there have been years, decades of research on the positive impact of women on an organization, on society, on the economy. Yet, every time there's a crisis, women are the first ones to pay the price. We've seen it during COVID. We're seeing it right now with the Trump administration. And I've been very vocal about that, because I think that there is sort of a comfort among certain, let's say, dominant groups of going back into what to them was working best. So leaving aside the fact that to have more women on a team brings more diverse perspectives, different ideas. And this is what fuels innovation. This is what you need when you want to create new products, penetrate new markets. We're talking so much about penetrating new markets, yet even here in Canada, a lot of organizations are resorting to old habits of being amongst middle-aged white men and not realizing that if you want to attain your objective, which is to diversify your markets, well, you need diversity of perspectives. It's just obvious to me. It should be obvious to anyone. And the research demonstrates it. This is not just me saying, well, because I'm the founder and CEO of Women in Governance, I think there should be more women. No, I'm not even saying that women should. I've never said that women should dominate. I've always said that it's the complementarity of talent. We don't want to replace anybody. We just want to work with men who understand the value of someone who sees things differently, just like us in a women's group. We value the presence of men in everything that we do. So, Simone de Beauvoir used to say, and that's like more than 50 years ago, she used to say that you have to be very vigilant about women's rights because that's the very first thing that is under attack, whether there's a crisis, economic, religious, political, economic. These are the first rights that are sort of taking a back seat. Vigilant.
Crazy. From all your experience over all these years, what separates organizations that talk about parity from those that actually achieve it?
So that's an interesting one because talking about parity, all organizations have at one time or another spoken about this because they felt it was the right thing to do, the trendy thing to do, what would attract employees, what would attract clients to them. And speaking is just, actually, I would rather you don't speak if you're not going to act. Interestingly enough, those organizations that have been very vocal and did not act afterwards have been called out a lot, especially in Europe, especially in the UK. I'm more into naming and faming. I like to say ABC Inc. or XYZ Inc. They do phenomenal things. They've really close the gender gap, or they've helped women progress, although they're in a male-dominated field, etc. And I have a long list of organizations that we name and fame on a regular basis because they've done our parity certification, and so they are actually following a very clear process to attain these objectives. They measure, they set objectives, they are transparent about their results. And so in the UK, where they actually often like to name and shame, on March 8 every year, when organizations on X or formerly Twitter would say things about, at ABC Inc., we're so proud, or we want more women, or we have the women, whatever. Well, that organization, there's an organization, I forget their name, in the UK, they will retweet and put their comments, and they'll say, really? Well, here are your actual results, because they have to dévoiler. Sorry, I'm looking for the word.
They have to report.
They have to report transparently, and it's public. So they'll do the research and they'll retweet and they'll say, well, this organization that's saying, oh, the women, they're at the top of our organization, they're everywhere, etc. Well, the reality is this. So for me, the important thing is not to have stellar results, because perfection is the enemy of progress. The important thing is to start by understanding where you stand on the gender parity spectrum. Because if you've never measured the gaps that you say you want to close, you can't close them. If you never measured them, you don't know their magnitude, you don't know their root causes, it's not going to work. So our parity certification helps organizations do just that. Better understand, there's about 80 different questions, better understand where they stand on the gender parity spectrum, but at every level of the organization. It's not just about adding a couple of women on the board and a woman on the executive committee. That will not do it. We really want to make sure that from the entry level, there are women that can be part of a healthy pipeline of female talent that are going to advance all the way to the top of the house. So these are the organizations that are working concretely and year after year remeasuring their results, because obviously every year we're a little bit more exigeant, demanding, because we take into consideration the fact that, well, culturally we're all evolving, we are expecting more, there are more and more women that are, and I mean, there's always been more than enough women. When they say we can't find the women, tell them to call me, because I've got this long list of women in my pocket, women who are educated. We're 60% of university graduates, women who are ambitious, women who are advancing in their careers. So it's not that the women are not out there. The only thing that I would say plays kind of against the women is their imposter syndrome, and the fact that they underestimate themselves, and that sometimes they will see an opportunity and think that they're not fit for it. Whereas a man doesn't even slow down for a second. And good for you, man. Good for you for being so bold and believing in yourself so much. Because the women, They underestimate themselves, and you can see it also when they do their self-evaluation in corporations. Men are giving themselves, oh my God, A pluses, while women are grading themselves very low, and their peers, their colleagues will boost their results, but when they just self-evaluate, it's the bosses and the peers that will say, no, you're actually great and you would be so good at this, that. Take this stretch assignment, move into a more senior role, and swim or sink. You'll make it. You'll be fine.
You've spoken in the past about women that are going through perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause. And given some of the discrimination that we see of women of a certain age within certain organizations, what do you believe needs to change for that to stop?
You know, it's interesting. If you look at a woman's career, we begin too young. We begin potentially a future mother, so that's not great either. So there's already, at the beginning of our career, we're already labeled. You come into an interview, you're in your 20s. They're not asking themselves this when a man comes in his 20s. He's an MBA graduate, he's looking for a job. The woman, oh, is she in a relationship? Is she going to go? How long is she going to go? How many kids is she going to have? You begin with that. Then obviously throughout the whole, good portion of your career, well, there's menstruations, periods. Well, then it's the whole, women are too emotional. They're not emotional. It's not a matter of being emotional. When men get angry, when men raise their voices, nobody worries about that. Perfectly fine. If a woman ever is, either decisive or wants to get her point across and seems to be too passionate about it, they start questioning, is there something hormonal? And then in no time are you already at the perimenopause or menopause period of your life where you go back to you continue, I should say, being judged. And it's really hard because we don't all react equally on the way that, we all have, how can I put this? We all have different personalities. We all react differently, yet we're all labeled with this female sort of label that just says, oh, she must have her period. Oh, she must be in menopause, etc. So I think it's really important that organizations recognize the fact that there might be needs for extra support for certain women. It's a reality. So training the managers around that. But, there are countries in the world, in Europe, namely, where they legislated for women who have menopause to get additional days off with pay. I'm not so sure that this is what we want to do because I think it's a great idea in certain instances, but when it becomes more costly for an organization, I don't want it to be an additional barrier. I don't want them to say, well, women, we have to pay for this and that and add an additional layer to it. I don't want a board to say, I don't know if we should take this woman on the board, because when do we go on those big boards? When we're in our 50s. So this is exactly at the time of menopause. And I wouldn't want that to be one of the issues that they take into account. Just take us for our capacity to analyze, to be part of a team, to have a democratic leadership, to think out of the box compared to the men who are there, and have different perspectives and different points of views that are going to enrich the conversation, help any board make a more robust decision. And honestly, this is true at all stages of our lives. And for the younger women, if I may just very briefly wrap on this subject, I think it's important for us not to position ourselves as the sole caregiver. We have children, we have spouses, and I understand during our pregnancy, obviously, we have no other choice. We're the ones carrying the babies, we're the ones breastfeeding. Once the baby is out, he can take care of the baby as much as we can. And that's where I think it's only fair that it be split evenly, which it's not in Canada, not anywhere in the world are women sharing the load, whether it's the chores at home or the children, evenly. They're still doing 2 to 3 times more work around the house and the children. That really needs to stop.
We also talk about salary. Now, let me just start this over. When we talk about gender parity, from your experience, what does salary parity actually look like? And no, let me start this over. You see,
Do you want to call it the gender wage gap?
Oh, the gender wage gap. Okay, yes. Thank you. In your opinion, how do we stop the gender pay gap that we're still seeing today?
If that is a real thing, despite legislation, I mean, almost 3 decades ago, we already came up with a legislation here in Quebec for equal pay. It has been adopted maybe 20 years later at the federal government level, which is great because, Quebec is one of the most, not one of the most, the most progressive province across Canada, one of the most progressive regions in the world when it comes to gender parity. Yet, we still see close to 11% gender gap in terms of wages. It's really unbelievable. So it's two facets in my book. First of all, there's organizations that continue to, probably guided by unconscious bias, to offer less to women. And they do this from entry levels. So a young MBA graduate, whether they're male or female, will be offered on average $5,000 difference. So the woman would get $5,000 less. There's absolutely no reasons. These two have followed the same path and they're coming in brand new to the organization. After that, the gap only widens year after year as women progress. The gap widens. Why? Not only because the organizations continue to have these bias and they'll, for instance, they'll ask things that are now forbidden in certain jurisdictions. There's legislation that doesn't allow potential employers, prospective employers, to ask, how much are you making now? How is this relevant to the conversation? Don't ask me how much I'm making. Tell me how much you're prepared to pay. What is the bracket for the job that I'm applying for? That's what I'm interested in. What I'm making now, if I'm underpaid in a different organization, do you suggest that you will underpay me as well? No. Or do I have to lie about what I'm making now so that I can anticipate earning more where I'm moving into a new role? So that needs to stop. But also, the women need to negotiate. And Andrea, they don't. They don't negotiate. They are amazing negotiators when it comes to negotiating for other people. Like, they're the best lawyers. They're great in a community setting where they will be negotiating for the vulnerable. But when it comes to them, there is still the stigma that I don't understand that is associated to the fact of asking for more money, asking for a bigger title, asking for the corner office. They're still having trouble doing that. So when I do workshops on, let's say, imposter syndrome, for instance, I always tell women, okay, if you don't understand that you could have had every year a few percentages extra in terms of your salary had you negotiated, but you just accepted what they gave you, or at the time that you get a promotion, you're just so happy they're thought of you for the promotion and they're giving you this title and these huge responsibilities that you forget to ask for the money that goes with it. Well, if you don't want to think of the money that you're leaving on the table, think of the number of years that you're leaving on the table, years of freedom and years of retirement. Because on average, on a 35-year career life, you're going to work 8 more years than a man who was in the exact same jobs as you because he negotiated. So think of 8 years out of 35. And hopefully that'll compel you to have the boldness and the courage to say, I'd like to talk about my salary now.
It's so important. And I was interviewing a guest recently who was actually sharing the reality that many women reach retirement age with just a fraction of money that they've put aside as a result of everything that you have just shared. And
Right.
given that women actually live longer, it is more imperative for us to take action and challenge, as you said, the realities that certain organizations, even despite legislation, which I find shocking, are still not following the guidelines. So yes, we need to be more bold. We need to speak up, and we definitely need to continue pressing for more progress in this area.
And Andrea, not only do we live longer, but when we are, in our prime years, we also spend a lot more on our families, on our parents, on our children, on, there's the pink tax. Everything that we buy at the pharmacy is more expensive than what men are buying. It's, if anything, we should be paid more. Let me put it this way.
Fully agree. So what advice would you have for a woman who has earned her seat at the table within an organization, but is still struggling to have true influence?
That brings us back to the very beginning of this conversation. Courage. being brave, because there's absolutely no point in having a seat at the table if you're going to be there as a token. Nobody cares about that. And why does it take boldness and courage? Because I've been on boards where I've heard or I've seen the huffing and puffing, because here we go, she's asking a question again. Well, damn right, I'm asking a question. You know why? Because I'm listening, and because I'm thinking, I'm analyzing, I've read the minutes, I've got things to contribute. And we all know, by the way, that when women enter a board, a board, they elevate the level of the board. Why? Because, well, they tend to over prepare. They go through all the documentation. They are so taken by their imposter syndrome. They so underestimate themselves that they over prepare. So all of a sudden, they're mastering everything. And so they've got questions. And it could make others feel like, oops, I haven't read. I don't even know what she's talking about. So yeah, it takes courage. And I've seen the huffing and puffing, and no, there we go again. I call it out. I go, okay, I understand that we could get to a resolution of what we're trying to do faster if we all just agree. But then why are we a board? Why is there not just a board chair who makes his own decisions looking at himself in the mirror? Because if we're all going to do this group think where we, follow his lead or her lead, if it's a female chair, more rare, unfortunately, then that's useless. So you actually want inquiring minds around the boardroom table. So I think you need to think of it as not being of someone who's just going easy with the flow, and that's not who you want to be. I'd rather be seen as a difficult woman because I'm asking the difficult questions than be seen as the token woman who sits and says nothing. This is not going to land you other boards. You're not going to be seen as someone who has brought value. So don't waste your time. Listen, you've got other better things to do with your time than spend your evenings at board meetings that you're just contemplating. You gotta, and honestly, it's hard at the beginning because there are so many unconscious bias that happen during a board meeting or any meeting for that matter. There's the man interrupting, where we get interrupted so much more than a man would ever get interrupted. You got to learn how to say, okay, I am not finished. Please give me a second. And then you can make your point. Or, okay, this is the third time you've interrupted me now. Can we stop this behavior, please? Because it's not helpful. But then there's the mansplaining. So it might be something that I am very, very knowledgeable of. And there could be a man who knows a lot less about it, but he wants to explain to me. That also takes a lot of courage and patience. And then there's my favorite, the heap eating. So heap eating being, I said something during the meeting, looks like nobody reacted, nobody said anything. And then 10 minutes later, George repeats what I said before, and everyone thinks, oh, what a great idea. Hang on, wait a second. So some women will say nothing and maybe will decide to no longer contribute because they don't want to get their ideas stolen, because everybody wants a bit of credit for what they're doing. Or you can call it out. Just say, thanks, George, for bringing my point back on the table, because when I said it, it seemed that either people didn't hear or were not interested, but glad we're debating my idea now. Let's do this. And I do it for others as well, because I see it. I'll say, thanks. This was Andrea's idea, and I'm really glad that you picked it up because I wanted to do so. I wanted to come back to that idea that Andrea brought earlier during the conversation. So I really encourage everyone to do this. Whether you're a man or woman, I don't care, but you see it happen, react to it.
Fully agree. There was another guest I interviewed recently who was saying that women's power in the boardroom actually starts in the bedroom. What's your view on that?
Why in the bedroom?
Well, it was her way to say that basically who we show up as within board meetings or within organization is also a reflection of who we are at a personal level within our, our relationships.
Yeah, no. Okay, good. I'm glad you've got a different perspective because it's always interesting for your listeners. So that's a perspective. That is not my perspective. I always say, look, what I do at work and what I do at home, yes, there's got to be, I don't transform into someone different, but I think these are two very different things. I think the fact that I'm not going to let anything go when it comes to my work. At home, I could be a little bit more lenient and just make things easier for everyone. But I would say, The analogy I like to use is actually the bathroom, where so much happens. This is why I like non-gendered bathrooms, because you know when they take a bathroom break, these men, they go into the bathroom and they're making the decisions together. You're not there. They come back, decisions been made. So non-gendered bathrooms are amazing because you're there, you hear them, you can talk, you can actually do what they do, which is when you go to the bathroom, this is the time, or the corridor, or the coffee break, whatever it is. This is the time to build up allyship. This is the time to share your idea and get people who are going to support your idea. I do this all the time. I will speak individually to board members. If I see that the idea, when I brought it to the board, there was a bit of reticence,
Resistance.
fine. I may not have the time to convince everybody, but I'll do it individually. And then come back to that boardroom and see the entire mood change, because all of a sudden that you've convinced them individually. You don't have to convince 100% of the people around the table, but if you've got majority, you're good to go.
Yes. Just give me 1 sec. I just need to check something on. Give me a second here. My children are. 1 second. My duty does not stop. I just wanted to make sure all was good. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No worries at all.
All right. What gives you hope and what genuinely worries you about where gender parity is headed globally?
Well, I'll start with what really worries me, because I want to end on something that's more positive. What really worries me is the rise of masculinism, the Andrew Tates of this world that have millions of followers. It's insane. He is teaching people how they can, men, he's teaching men, how to hit a woman, how to talk down to a woman, how women should obey the man and the man should obey God. And I mean, it's just difficult to witness. It's very difficult to witness. I mean, I'm often under attack on social media since I've started being very vocal on the Trump administration, and on my Facebook page, the public Facebook page that I have, that went from 10,000 to 60-some thousand followers in less than a year, by the way. Since I started talking about these things, it's mostly Americans that are on there now. So what worries me is the fact that it's not just one man. He brought this, but they all cheered. And it seems to me that so many people and organizations, by the way, that were doing the right work to advance gender parity decided that we don't have to pretend anymore. Let's be ourselves. And they're giving up programs that they had put in place that had actually not only advanced the women, but that had advanced their innovation, their creativity. And they gave that up. So this is what worries me the most. But what gives me hope is that I think we've hit the bottom. I think at this point, I guess it's all, I don't know, it's cyclical or whatever it was, but probably there were with the woke movement that went too far, and they put the women in that same movement. For me, it's two different things. Okay, women are 51% of the population. We are not an underrepresented group. We are half the population, and we give birth to the other half of the population. So our power is a lot more than what we seem to think. So there have been things that might have gone a bit far in terms of some asks from other groups, and they put everybody in the same basket, including the women. But at this point, I think there's a real rise of not only the women who say, okay, enough, but also, and by the way, in terms of what worries me, it's also the young women who decide to be tradwives and stay at home and don't want to go to school. That really, really gets me worried. But it's interesting because when you see Erica Kirk, who built her whole, her and her husband have built a whole organization on that herself. She's got university degrees. She's made millions. She's a career woman. She got married in her 30s. She had her children in her 30s, but she's telling 20-year-old women to not study and stay home and have babies. So that is a disaster because we know that more than 50% of couples end in divorce. So what are you going to do? University degree is never going to divorce you. Your career is never going to divorce you. So that is a huge concern. And it's never too late. These women in 10 years, they wake up, just go back to school. But I hope you've got a bit of money ahead of you to be able to do that. And what does give me hope is the fact that first of all, there are a lot of decent people who are appalled by what's going on and who are working wholeheartedly to turn things around. When I look at our 2025 in Canada for women in governance, despite all this craziness, we still grew. So that to me is unbelievable, knowing that unfortunately in the US we shrunk, but in Canada we still grew, and we grew enough to compensate for the loss in the US and to compensate even more. We're launching in France. I think that what we saw in Davos with the Mark Carney speech, with the Emmanuel Macron speech, I think there is a real, and it's not necessarily about gender equity, because both the Canadian government and the French government have kind of put on, temporary pause this issue, which was central to both governments for many years. So despite that, they have a very clear resolve to become masters of their destinies again. So that gives me hope. And launching in Paris, where I'm going to be in a couple of days, the welcome that we're receiving, because I'm writing to all these big organizations in France, and they're so happy that we're coming to France, and they're giving me all these meetings. That really gives me hope, because these are very big organizations with very senior leaders that I'm meeting, and they're still making the time for this topic. That's important.
I wish you immense success
Thank
in
you so
the
much.
French market and beyond. I want to talk about joy now. You have lived in 3 continents and worked at the highest levels of power. What did you learn about joy along the way?
Well, to me, joy is, well, first of all, I think there's something in the DNA or in the water in Lebanon. I don't know, but Lebanese people are joyful people. And quite frankly, if you've ever been to Beirut, no city in the world parties like Beirut. And I've lived through the war, and I've lived through occupation and invasion and bombing. And you know what? It's not easy, but somehow there's always the capacity to find joy in everything. Well, we're alive, joy. We have our children, joy. We have our parents, joy. And even when we're going through hardship, well, joy comes back quite rapidly. But what for me personally, so not talking as a Lebanese, but talking as Caroline Codsi, joy comes from freedom. Joy comes from being able to, and that freedom has so many different aspects. Joy comes from the freedom of choosing what I want to do, choosing my path, choosing my passion, choosing to stand up for what I believe is right. Even if people say, oh, this is risky, do you really want to talk about this? Well, yeah, because otherwise I won't have any joy in my heart, because I've always felt that if others are going through hardship, I can't look away. My joy comes from doing what I can, from using my voice for others. This is joy for me. Joy is also being able to be someone who connects easily with people, who loves people, who has friends. There's one sentence I've always said to my children is, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver, but the other is gold. And I make friends everywhere I go, because I'm just very accessible and very curious, which is, I think, the best combo to make new friends. But, my best friend from when I was 13 years old is my best friend today so I really think this is, all these things bring joy, and joy of being able to walk away, having the freedom. And this is why, this whole trad wife thing is a disaster. I mean, I was married 2.5 times, and to have that freedom of being able to say, this relationship no longer brings me joy, well, that's joy right there. Being able to go somewhere else, start something new, and just feel the joy again.
Amazing. And if there would be a recipe to live more joyfully, what would be the 3 main ingredients?
I don't know that I have a recipe, but I would say that, what I find very difficult from people who are always grim is that they're so self absorbed. They are so self obsessed. They only look at the small picture, they look at themselves, and they dwell, they're not happy. No, 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 no. You have to come out of, and look, it's easy. Think of people who are living in very difficult conditions, poor, I don't think we call them third world countries anymore, but emerging countries, or countries at war. And you can see the children are still smiling. The people are still finding joy in simply the fact that the togetherness, the being alive. So I think that when you don't sweat the petty things and you really start to look at a bigger picture, you are part of a huge universe have an impact, do something for others. That will bring you joy. I mean, when people have the winter blues, I always say, well, do you volunteer? Do you go anywhere? Do you go see people who are actually living a really difficult life? You're telling me your life is difficult? Please. We're having this conversation. I'm embarrassed for you. We all have difficulties. I'm not saying if you're going through a hardship, don't tell me, I don't want to hear about it. Tell me. But I mean, that cannot be what defines you. And there's also a sentence that I always use when we're going through difficulty, whether it's at home, at work. I always say, this too shall pass. And my team, my amazing team at Women in Governance, although we've had past 15 years, we've been like this. Amazing. Don't think there haven't been obstacles. Don't think there haven't been times where we thought, oh my God, is this the end of us? Collapse. No. And with the team, so the newcomers always go like, oh my God, are we going to be okay? And the others go like, this too shall pass. And we find solutions. And every crisis that we go through makes us so much stronger. So much stronger. I've done a TEDx on resilience. I think it's 50,000 views. So in French, en français. But it's got subtitles. I think TEDx put English subtitles on this. So I think that's the key. Resilience is the key. And it is a muscle that you can actually train. People think, oh, it is your personality also. It is also in your levels of hormone, your dopamine. It's in the way that your parents have raised you. Did you have love in your family? Did you feel loved? That's extremely important for your level of resilience. But it's also something that you can work on. Anybody can be resilient. And that will bring you joy.
Beautiful. One final question for you, Caroline. If you could challenge our audience to take one bold move this week, what would it be?
One bold move would be to, when something shocks you or when something goes against your values, speak up. Don't look away. Give it a try. Once you've tried it, I guarantee you can't go back. You can't go back to being indifferent or silent. And the sense of pride that you will have from putting your foot down and saying, no, this is wrong. This is not what we were taught to do. This goes against my values. Even if you feel like, seems like the group is all in agreement that it's okay to do this, but you don't, give it a try.
Amazing. Caroline, it's been an immense pleasure to speak with you today.
Merci.
Thank you so much for the beautiful work that you do. Keep shining.
Well, thank you so much. And for all your thoughtful questions, I really appreciated the time I spent with you, Andrea.
Thank you.